life is devalued, and morality as we used to know it, what's right and what's wrong, is no longer even a factor. A political solution, or urgent action by our government, is no longer feasible to address the billion-person starvation problem, just as it's no longer feasible to address the problems in many sacrifice zones in America, from the cancer-stricken villages around mountaintops that have been blown to smithereens by coal barons, or the slums of New Jersey, where once bustling manufacturing centers have been offshored to slave labor countries, leaving behind poverty, drug addiction, and violence. The forces of corporate capitalism are on the march around the world now. And without political mechanisms to stop them, what else is there left? Chris Hedges joins me now. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, contributor to Truthdig, and author of several books, including his latest, Days of Destruction, Days of Revolt. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you on. So as far as this global food crisis, the latest, is this a symptom of what you describe as corporate capitalism killing us all?
Of course. And what we're watching is the collapse of globalization because it's not a sustainable system. It's a system that commodifies everything. Human beings become commodities. The natural world becomes a commodity that without any kind of regulation left, any kind of impediments, any kind of control, exploit these commodities until exhaustion or collapse, which is why the environmental crisis is intimately twinned with the economic crisis. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to look at these areas, these sacrifice zones, which Joe Sacco and I did over the last 2 years within the United States, because they went first and we're going next. We have to look at these areas of the world where unregulated, uncontrolled corporate capitalism destroyed the environment, destroyed communities, thrust people into horrific poverty and misery because now that they've finished with these zones, they will, in business terms, harvest what's left. And that's precisely what's happening as we watch the disintegration of the American middle class, rise in commodity prices, the disastrous effects of global warming, droughts, floods, heat waves. None of it's going to stop. There's nothing within the formal mechanisms of power to halt these corporate forces that have seized control of our judiciary, of our legislative branches of government, of our systems of communication. We cannot appeal to them. We don't have mechanisms within these systems of power to reform these elements, and that's why I think our last best hope is to engage in mass acts of civil disobedience, which we've seen in Europe, we've seen in Egypt. And remember, the rise in food prices were one of the primary engines that drove people into the streets in both Tunisia and Egypt, and which we saw here with the Occupy movement.
You were just, I believe you're in court today, and this is about the NDAA issue that you've been challenging, and so far have been successful at challenging, the indefinite provision in the NDAA. You've talked about the indefinite provision as well as the data that's being collected on all Americans in Utah through the NSA and things like that as means to criminalize dissent. Why is it necessary for the elite today to begin creating mechanisms to criminalize dissent?
Well, yeah, you're talking about indefinite detention, and I was in court today for the final hearing in our challenge, our lawsuit against Barack Obama and Leon Panetta. Federal Judge Catherine Forrest had issued a temporary injunction. This was the last day in which both sides presented briefs to see whether or not she will issue a permanent injunction. Section 1021 allows the military to seize American citizens, hold them in military facilities, including our offshore penal colonies, without due process, and in the language of this section, indefinitely, in an age of permanent war. That is forever, and the actual language is the end of hostilities. So that's just part of a piece of the puzzle. We've seen the use of the Espionage Act, the refusal on the part of the Obama administration to restore habeas corpus, the FISA Amendment Act, which permits the warrantless wiretapping, eavesdropping, and monitoring of tens of millions of American citizens. And we now know that all of our information is stored out in a supercomputer in Utah. The Authorization to Use Military Force Act. It's all there. It's all part of a piece. And that's because the security and surveillance state, the corporate state, understands very well what's coming. They will push and push until there's blowback, until there's a reaction. They certainly know and expect a reaction, and they are preparing for that reaction, both in terms of distorting the legal system to make any kind of democratic dissent impossible, and then, in essence, militarizing police forces, which is already very far along, so that they can use draconian forms of repression and coercion in terms of crowd control. I mean, you already see, and you can look at the war on drugs as a kind of precursor to what's going to happen to all of us. A night raid in Oakland, for instance, it doesn't look any different anymore from a night raid in Fallujah. They're dressed in black, they're carrying automatic weapons, command and control, helicopters with searchlights, and that's what happens when empires implode. The non-democratic, harsher forms of control that are used on the outer reaches of empire migrate back into the heartland, and that's the process that's underway.
Well, as far as revolutions go, I mean, there's been lots of writing about revolutions, and it's not so much that things are so bad people just revolt. It's more that expectations are no longer being met, which causes populations to revolt. Have you seen over the last 30 years a lowering of expectations by the corporate elites so that we have a pretty docile population that's short of those mass movements other than Occupy, which is crippled today, that will bring about that sort of change that we need right now?
Well, the political philosopher Sheldon Wolin argues that the two primary mechanisms which have traditionally ensured political passivity are cheap, mass-produced consumer goods and credit, easy access to cheap credit. Both of those two things have dried up. And the state, in order to retain control, as people now don't have access to credit to sustain a lifestyle that was once sustained through labor unions and wages, as these mass-produced goods are no longer cheap, as we have an underclass, as we do, which is now 50 million, roughly, people spending 35+% of their income on food, then you have to use the harsher forms of control, and that's precisely where we are headed. You know, the illusions of who we are, where we're going, what's possible, these are all being shattered. It's clearly evident to larger and larger segments of the American population that good job they lost is not coming back. That those benefits are not coming back. And not only that, will never be there for their children. And as more and more people, and I think we are watching this process now underway, awaken to this reality, it fuels a deep kind of rage, a legitimate sense of betrayal. How that is expressed, whether that is expressed through nonviolent means, which was essentially the Occupy movement, whether that's expressed through a kind of proto-fascist right-wing backlash, and we just saw one of these random racist shootings take place in the Sikh temple, and Gabby Gifford's attempted assassin was just sent away today. I mean, that's the kind of upheaval. These kinds of extremes will be empowered. I think it was very misguided on the part of the state to try to physically eradicate or erase the Occupy movements. A rational response, this is a constant theme in Paul Krugman's columns, to the problem would have meant a moratorium on foreclosures and bank repossessions, forgiveness of student debt, massive jobs program targeted at the age of those under the age of 25, and maybe a rational healthcare system. That's a minimum, and that didn't happen. And so we're headed for very, very turbulent times.
Absolutely. We live in interesting, dangerous, turbulent times. Chris Hedges, thank you very much.
Thanks, Sam.